Hey guys, tonight we slip into the sandals of a Sumerian beer brewer, the kind of person whose entire day revolves around bubbling clay pots, goat-related mishaps, and enough barley to drown a donkey. It's early morning in the ancient city of Ur, sometime around 2500 BCE, and the air already smells like a bread factory on fire. The floor beneath you is cracked clay, warm from a night's worth of body heat, and your reed roof filters the rising sun into dusty shafts that poke at your eyelids like a nosy neighbor. You're lying on a thin woven mat. Your back is stiff. Your mouth tastes like yesterday's brew gone wrong, and the first thing you hear is a buzzing gnat doing laps around your ear like it trained with the Acadian Air Force. You groan, scratch something you probably shouldn't, and sit up. This is your world. Mud walls, woven baskets, and the faint, comforting sound of a bubbling fermentation jar nearby. Your home smells like warm grain, wood ash, and that faintly tangy, beer-in-progress scent that only fellow brewers understand. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your location and what time it is where you are. Always fun to see who's drifting off to sleep across this little blue planet. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You nudge the sleeping dog by the door. He grunts and goes back to dreaming of whatever ancient dogs dream about, probably oversized bones and chasing goats, and step outside. The sun is still stretching. It casts long shadows between the temple and the granary walls, making the bricks look like golden teeth. You squint at the sky, breathe in, and instantly regret it. The wind has carried the sweet and sour scent of the tanner's shop again. Your neighbor, bless him, insists on scraping hides before breakfast. Still, there's no time to dwell. You need to check your fermentation jars. The last batch was, let's say, ambitious. You tried using some leftover date mash for sweetness. The result smelled like a fruit bat had exploded in it. But today's a new day, and if the gods are in a good mood, maybe this one won't taste like regret. You pad across the courtyard in bare feet, stepping over stray bits of straw and yesterday's sandal strap. The fermentation pit is covered by a warped lid. You lean down, lift it just a hair, and sigh. Still bubbling. Still alive. Still not attacking you with mold. Behind you, your apprentice coughs himself awake, mutters something about needing more sleep, and promptly trips over the same pile of barley husks he tripped over yesterday. You don't even look. Just wave vaguely in his direction and hope he figures it out. You're the brewer here. He's the one still learning how not to fall into clay vats. In the corner, your wife's already up, kneading bread near the fire pit. She glances at you, raises an eyebrow, and says nothing. But her eyebrow says, "You better not ruin today's batch like last time." You nod solemnly. This morning, you're determined. You are a master of beer, a sacred artisan of the temple economy, at least until someone reminds you you're behind on this week's quotas. As you scoop a little of the barley gruel for tasting, you reflect on something odd you heard yesterday. Apparently, in the ziggurat's shadow, one brewer swears he saw a god-shaped foam rise from his jar. Historians still argue whether this was religious revelation or just early signs of heat stroke, but in Sumer, the line between divine and spoiled ferment is often blurry. Still, it gets you thinking, maybe today's batch will impress not just the high priest, but the heavens. You stand, stretch your arms until something in your spine goes pop, and take one last look at the glowing horizon. The city of Ur hums around you, its rooftops scattered like broken pottery under the awakening sun. You squint at the ziggurat in the distance, its shadow stretching long and proud, and whisper a small prayer to Ninkasi, goddess of beer. Because if she's listening, you're going to need all the help you can get. You trudge back inside and kick at the woven mat your apprentice has somehow rewrapped himself in like a panicked caterpillar. He groans. You ignore him. There's barley to stir, and the sun is already climbing like a judgmental overseer. You grab your stirring rod, a simple thing, long and blackened at the tip from endless use, and head toward the large clay vat in the corner. This one's from yesterday's mix, and it smells promising. Earthy, tangy, with just a hint of sourness. You poke at the surface. It gives slightly, like someone buried warm porridge under a damp blanket. Perfect. The morning routine begins. You scratch your neck, adjust your belt, which is, let's be honest, just a frayed rope, and mutter something halfway between a chant and a complaint. Then the stirring starts. Long, slow strokes around the vat, lifting and pressing, making sure nothing's settled too heavily at the bottom. The thick mash resists your efforts like it has personal feelings about being disturbed. As the air fills with the rich scent of barley and half-fermented bread, your mind drifts. You remember being a boy, watching your uncle brew his own beer. He claimed to be the best in the city, until one batch exploded and took half his eyebrow with it. After that, he stuck to barley cakes. Good call. Your apprentice finally lurches upright and shuffles over, still blinking like he's not sure which plane of reality he's on. You want me to, he starts. Yes, you interrupt, handing him a smaller pot. Start crushing the roasted barley. And don't sneeze into it this time. He nods solemnly. Last week's contamination incident still lingers like a ghost. That one batch had to be accidentally fed to the pigs. Even they hesitated. Outside, the city is stirring. You hear the clang of a pot from a nearby kitchen, the bray of a goat refusing to be milked, and a few choice curses from someone who clearly stepped on a thorn. The neighbors are up. The world is up. And you're already elbow-deep in frothy grain paste. It's comforting, in a weird way. The texture of the mash, the way it pulls against your stick like doughy resistance. This is your craft, your livelihood, and, if the high priests are to be believed, a sacred act. Beer, after all, is part of daily rations. Payment, ritual, bribery, diplomacy, breakfast, sometimes all at once. Historians still argue whether brewers in Sumer were mostly women, men, or both depending on social status. But in your case, it doesn't matter. You inherited the family trade through sheer persistence and one badly timed temple bet. Now, it's what you do every day, from before the sun blinks awake to when the ziggurat's shadow eats your courtyard whole. You grunt, stand up straight, and crack your neck to the side. The stirring is done for now. Time to check the starter batch, the one you covered with reed mats and desperately hoped would behave overnight. You lift the cover gingerly. A puff of warm air escapes. Smells faintly of sour figs and ancient ambition. You nod. Acceptable. Not amazing, but good enough to avoid another stern lecture from the brewmaster general, also known as your wife's aunt. You and your apprentice move like a two-person assembly line. He grinds, you test the paste, you swap tools, he drops one, you curse under your breath. It's like an old dance, clumsy, loud, somehow efficient. Eventually, he tries to hum one of those temple chants he only half remembers. You respond with a drumbeat on the side of the vat, sinking to his tune just enough to make him grin. And just like that, the rhythm of the morning settles in, a blend of muscle memory, hope, and the occasional slap to keep the flies off the mash. There's a light breeze today. It sneaks through the cracks in the walls and brushes your cheek, bringing with it the scent of clay, smoke, and wet reeds from the canals. A brief moment of peace. You let it settle in your lungs, like something holy. Then the apprentice knocks over a bucket and breaks the spell. Of course. You sigh. Pick it up. Pour what's salvageable back into the mix. Shake your head. One day, you mutter, you'll be the one yelling at someone else. He laughs nervously. He knows you're only half joking. You return to the vat, look at the pulpy mass of barley and bread, and think, not bad. Not perfect, but not bad. A few more hours, and it'll be time to move it to the fermenting jars. But for now, you take a break, sit on the sun-warmed stone, and scratch at the back of your knee where something big you. Again, you look out toward the street, where two children are chasing a skinny goat with the kind of determination only hunger, or vengeance, can inspire. You smile faintly. This is your life. This is your rhythm. And for a moment, just one quiet moment, it almost feels like you're winning. You rise from the warm stone slab, knees creaking like old hinges, and head toward the canal with your largest jug in hand. Time to fetch water, again. The last batch drained more than you thought, and the fermentation jars aren't going to fill themselves. You swing the jug over your shoulder and begin the walk. It's not far, maybe a few hundred paces, but under the Sumerian sun, even shadows feel heavy. The path is lined with cracked mud walls, some crumbling like old bread. Chickens strut with unearned confidence, and a child runs past you holding what appears to be a lizard in a dream. You nod to a neighbor weeding baskets on a rooftop. She shouts something you don't quite catch but assume is a joke at your expense. Everyone knows the brewer, especially when the batch goes bad. You've had your name attached to more than one unfortunate temple banquet, but also a few legendary feasts, so it evens out. At the canal, the water waits, slow, green, and pretending to be cleaner than it is. You crouch, dunk the jug, and hope none of the floaty bits are sentient. The water's cool, a little gritty, and smells faintly of duck. Still, it's better than the alternative. You glance left. A rival brewer is scooping from the same canal. You both nod. Neither of you speaks. There's a silent truce here. You could badmouth his brew. He could mention the time your apprentice confused goat dung for roasted grain, but what would it solve? The water tastes like mud. The priests drink it anyway, and no one remembers who brewed what once the party starts. Historians still debate whether Sumerian brewers filtered their water through sand, cloth, or just blind optimism. You give the jug a swirl, inspect the surface, and figure if it hasn't grown legs, it's drinkable. As you walk back, the jug sloshing against your back, you're nearly run over by a small cart pulled by what might be the city's angriest donkey. Its owner waves an apology, not even slowing down. You step aside, muttering a half-prayer for anyone who dares drink beer made with that donkey's attitude in the mix. Back at the workshop, your apprentice has done something both impressive and slightly horrifying. He's managed to crush an entire pile of barley while also burning part of the mat it was sitting on. You stare. He grins, offering a fistful of roasted husks. You say nothing. You've learned that sometimes silence is louder than yelling. You simply take the jug to the clay mixing pit and begin pouring. The water hisses against the warm vat, steam curling like lazy spirits. The mash thickens. The scent shifts, earthy, smoky, just the faintest touch of sweetness. You nod. It'll do. Next step, sacred loaves. Not for eating, for fermenting. These are barley cakes, part baked to unlock the sugars, then soaked until they dissolve into the brew. You start crumbling yesterday's batch into the vat. They're dense, sour-smelling, and exactly as appetizing as moldy bricks. But they do the job. The apprentice helps, occasionally sneaking bites of the crust when he thinks you're not looking. You let it slide. It's probably safer than the fish he tried to roast last week. As the mix grows thicker, your arms ache. The paste resists like a grumpy ox. You keep going. This is the critical point. If the water's too warm or the bread too dry, you'll get foam, not ferment. And no one wants to drink frothy failure. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow with the corner of your tunic. The sun's climbed high, turning the air into something solid and chewy. A fly lands on your arm, laughs, and leaves. You glance toward the temple across the rooftops. Somewhere in there, scribes are inscribing daily rations, soldiers are arguing over dates, and the high priest is probably wondering why your beer hasn't arrived yet. The pressure builds, not unlike the gases in a tightly sealed jar. And just as you're about to lower the lid on the vat, you hear it. A soft burble. The good kind. The sound of fermentation beginning, just barely, like the first whisper of gossip in a quiet room. You smile. It's working. You and your apprentice cover the vat with damp reeds, tying them tight with strips of palm fiber. You press down the edges, whisper a quick word to Ninkasi for good measure, and step back. There's still a long way to go, but for now, the day has direction. You stretch your arms overhead, bones clicking like cheap pottery. Somewhere in your gut, a pang reminds you that breakfast hasn't happened yet. And so, you look over to your apprentice and say the words he's been waiting for. Go get the goat cheese. And maybe something that didn't scream before it died. He runs. You chuckle. And you lean back against the wall, feeling the sun on your face, the promise of beer in the air, and a moment of satisfaction humming deep in your chest like a low drumbeat. The smell of goat cheese hits your nose before your apprentice even turns the corner. It's pungent, sharp, and, mercifully, not spoiled. He carries it in a woven pouch, tied shut with a reed twist that's already unraveling. You give him a look. He shrugs, mouth already full. You both settle near the vat, backs against the warm clay, and unwrap the morning meal. Alongside the cheese, he's brought a few flat barley cakes, hard as roof tiles, and a handful of dates so dry they could qualify as fossils. You break the bread with effort, chewing slowly while staring into the middle distance like someone pretending not to be disappointed. Could be worse, he mumbles around a bite. You nod. It could always be worse. As the sun climbs, the courtyard warms. The mash inside the vat settles under its covering like a sleeping animal. You watch for a moment, half expecting it to twitch or burp. When it doesn't, you lean back and let yourself enjoy a rare moment of stillness. Then comes the buzzing. Not of flies, though those are ever present, but of voices. Across the alley, Two older women are deep in conversation, each clutching a small jar of your beer from yesterday's batch. One of them raises her voice just enough for it to carry. Tastes better than that sour stuff the temple handed out last week. And it didn't make me see visions this time. The other nods thoughtfully. Still gave my husband hiccups for half a day. He deserved it. You smile. Praise wrapped in curses. That's high approval in this city. Your apprentice grins. We should make a sign, he says. Call it no visions this time, Brew. You shake your head, but the idea lingers. It's better than hiccups and regret, which, unfortunately, was a fairly accurate description of your spring batch. You brush the crumbs from your lap and stretch your arms. It's time for the next step, roasting the grain paste into fermentable loaves. You signal to your apprentice, and together you begin forming fist-sized lumps of mash, shaping them roughly by hand and pressing them onto large, flat stones that have soaked in the sun's heat all morning. The smell intensifies, rich, toasty, slightly nutty. It fills the air with a scent that's somewhere between fresh bread and old hope. As each loaf stiffens on the stone, you flip it, trying not to burn your fingers. Your apprentice yelps once. You pretend not to hear. Historians still argue whether these loaves were ever actually consumed on their own or were solely used in beer brewing. You've tried one once, raw, hard, and so sour your teeth felt like they curled inward. Safe to say, they're more useful in a jar than on a plate. One by one, you gather the half-baked loaves and place them in a reed basket lined with scraps of cloth. You'll soak them later to start the next round of fermentation. For now, they need to cool, and you need a moment to stop sweating like a sacrificial ox. You head toward the shade, swatting at a beetle the size of your thumb. The city hums behind you, shouts from the market, the rhythmic thunk of grinding stones, a distant flute played badly by someone who thinks they're impressing a neighbor. You pause by the kiln to check the heat. Still warm, still promising. You toss a few dried reeds into the embers just to be sure. Sparks leap like tiny spirits before fading into the ash. Then a commotion, the clang of pottery, followed by a string of loud apologies. You whip around. Your apprentice has tripped again, over the same broken brick as yesterday, and dropped a clay lid. It's not shattered, but your nerves nearly did. You exhale through your nose. Deep. Controlled. Like someone who meditates under threat of exile. You've got 2 feet, you say. Use them like they belong to the same person. He nods furiously. You know he means well. But sometimes, you suspect he was raised by goats. With the loaves cooling and the sun nearing its harshest point, you decide to rest for a few minutes. You settle into a corner, let your legs stretch, and tilt your head back against the wall. Overhead, the sky is pale and unblinking. The kind of heat that makes even the ziggurat look droopy. Your thoughts wander, past batches, old mistakes, the time a rat crawled into a jar and came out blissfully drunk. You never told the temple about that one. Some things are better left between brewer and rodent. A breeze brushes your face. You close your eyes. Just for a second. And then you hear it. A soft splatter. You open one eye. The apprentice is washing his hands directly over the fermentation jar. Stop, you bark. Too late. He freezes. You groan. He gulps. The gods are probably laughing. You lunge faster than someone your age has lunged in years, snatching the wreathed lid and slamming it over the mouth of the jar before another droplet falls in. Your apprentice stumbles back, both hands still dripping, eyes wide like a goat caught chewing temple offerings. Did I ruin it? He squeaks. You don't answer immediately. You're too busy examining the thin sheen of water now clinging to the rim. Not much. Not enough to spoil the entire batch, probably. But this is brewing. Probably is what gets entire festivals cancelled. You sigh. We'll know tomorrow. He nods, as if committing that phrase to memory. We'll know tomorrow. It has the ring of a proverb, half wisdom, half shrug. You wipe your hands on your tunic and start reading the lid more tightly than usual. It's a decent seal. The gods might show mercy. Or spite. Sometimes they don't even check the labels. You turn toward the courtyard and spot an elder walking your way, thin, sun-worn, dressed in simple wool. His gait is slow, his brow furrowed in the permanent scowl of someone who's tasted too many disappointing brews. The brewmaster's inspector. Of course. Keep stirring something, you hiss to your apprentice. Look productive. The old man enters the workshop without a word, nods curtly, and moves straight toward your sealed jars like he owns them. You bow, muttering the ritual greeting through a tight jaw. He grunts back, then crouches beside the largest vat. He sniffs, taps the lid, sniffs again, leans closer, then stands and looks you dead in the eye. Smells better than last moon, he says. You resist the urge to do a triumphant dance. Last moon's batch had been rushed, too sweet, not enough bite. This one might pass. Still early, you reply modestly. Ferment's young. He grunts again, either approval or indigestion. Then, without warning, he uncorks one of yesterday's vessels and dips a small ladle inside. The silence is thick. He sniffs, swirls, then sips. A pause. A swallow. A pause again. You don't breathe. It's stable, he says finally. Balanced. And it didn't fight back. Your apprentice lets out a gasp. You elbow him. I'll report it to the temple, the inspector mutters. Keep it consistent. No surprises. Then he turns and walks out without another word, his footsteps crunching against the courtyard grit like a judge's gavel. You exhale. Lean on the table. Let your forehead rest in your palm. That, right there, is the highest compliment you're likely to get this season. Your apprentice beams. He liked it. You grunt. He didn't hate it. That's enough. Historians still debate whether temple inspectors actually understood brewing or just liked asserting control over anything that bubbled. Based on today, you're leaning toward the latter. Still, it's a win. And in your line of work, a win means your name isn't scratched into the temple's never again tablet. You glance toward the sun, almost noon. Time to prepare the delivery scrolls. You drag out a wooden board covered in drying clay tablets and sit cross-legged with a blunt stylus. Your apprentice reads off the amounts, 4 jugs to the lower temple, 2 for the priest of Enlil, 1 for the neighbor who lent us that giant spoon. You record each one, scratching symbols carefully into the soft surface. Names, quantities, destinations. It's tedious work, but oddly satisfying, like stitching a day together from pieces of barley and effort. Halfway through, your apprentice points at a name. Didn't we already give him some last week? You pause. He claims it vanished. Said his brother drank it. Convenient. Suspicious. You adjust the symbol next to his name. Add a little squiggle. You'll know what it means. You always do. The tablets will dry by evening, ready for the scribes. You set them on the shelf, wiping the clay dust from your palms. You glance over at the fermentation jars. Quiet. Still. Too quiet? No, just resting. Like a cat digesting a large bird. The sun casts long fingers across the floor. Soon the city will fall into that brief, hot hush, when people stop moving, dogs lie flat, and even the gods seem to nap. You take the opportunity. Set a small jar of your last finished batch in the shade. Take a sip. Cold it is not, but smooth. Slightly sweet. Mellow. You exhale. Your apprentice eyes you. Can I? You hand him the jar. He takes a careful sip and grimaces. Still tastes like hay. You grin. Good. That means it's authentic. He gags. You chuckle. And in the distance, the city exhales with you, smoke rising from rooftops, the drone of insects louder than conversation, the world pausing just enough to remind you that brewing, like life, is a waiting game. You don't get long to savor the quiet. From down the alley, a familiar voice slices through the stillness like a clay shard through wet sandals. It's your cousin, one of the loud ones. He storms in with the urgency of someone being chased by a philosophical crisis or, more likely, his own debts. There's trouble at the grinding stones, he blurts out. You blink. Which ones? The ones by the west gate. Everyone's talking about it. Come quick. You sigh, hand the half-finished jar back to your apprentice, who's now leaning precariously on a fence beam, and dust your knees off as you rise. You already know what this is. Probably a broken stone, a rat infestation, or someone claiming their grain screamed before it was milled. The path to the grinding area takes you past shouting vendors, goats that appear to be plotting something, and 2 girls singing a chant that, oddly, includes your name in a verse about things that smell funny. You try not to take it personally. When you arrive, the scene is chaotic. One of the communal grinding stones has cracked clean down the middle, and 3 workers are arguing about whose fault it was. One blames the heat. Another blames bad omens. The third is blaming your beer, which, apparently, was used to soften the barley before grinding. That's not what it's for, you say flatly. It worked once, the third insists. You pinch the bridge of your nose. Did it, though? Historians still debate the many experimental uses of beer in Sumer, medicine, bread softener, mouthwash. Yes, really. You suspect this one won't make the list. You examine the broken stone. It's old, pockmarked, and held together with more hope than integrity. The truth is, it was bound to fail. But being a brewer, you're a convenient scapegoat. You offer a shrug and a suggestion. Use the one by the granary. Just don't soak anything in beer first. The crowd grumbles but shuffles away. Your cousin claps you on the shoulder like you've just negotiated peace with the Gudians. You're good at this, he says. Might want to try politics. You laugh. I prefer things that make sense, like fermentation. On the way back, you swing by the small market strip to barter for new reed cords and maybe a handful of dried figs if the vendor's in a good mood. You trade a portion of last week's batch, sealed, labeled, and surprisingly well reviewed. You spot a woman selling pots, her wares lined up like clay ducklings. She eyes you and says, "Got anything strong enough to clean my husband's ears out?" "Only if you don't want him back afterward," you reply. She grins and waves you off. When you finally return home, your apprentice is stirring again, bless his clumsy soul, and has somehow kept the jars untouched, the fire fed, and the air only moderately thick with smoke. You nod approvingly. He beams, then promptly knocks over a ladle. "Back to balance," you mutter. The loaves you half-baked earlier are now ready. You take them to the soaking vat, setting them gently in the warm water. They hiss softly, steam rising like sighs from ancient mouths. You stir slowly, breaking the loaves apart until they form a dense, murky paste. This is where the magic begins again. The sugars start waking. The wild yeast, gifts from the air, the walls, your own hands, begin their silent feast. If all goes well, this will bubble by dawn. If not, you'll have a sour pot and a sourer mood. The apprentice crouches nearby, watching closely. How do you know when it's working? You smile. It smells like it's dreaming. He squints. That doesn't mean anything. You shrug. Neither does half of what priests say. He laughs. You pretend not to, but it slips out anyway. Then, a surprise, your neighbor appears at the doorway holding a small, decorated jar. "Tried your beer," she says. "Didn't hate it." "High praise," you reply. "Want another?" She nods. You trade her a fresh jar for a handful of plums. She's already halfway down the street when she calls back. "Tell your apprentice not to sing while stirring, it curdled halfway through." He blushes. You make a note of it. Evening's still far off, but the light's shifting. The walls glow warmer, the air thickens with promise. In the vat, tiny bubbles begin to rise. The brew is dreaming. And so, for now, are you. The vat bubbles just right, not too fast, not too foul, and that means it's time for the most nerve-wracking part of the process, measuring the mash-to-water ratio. Too much water, and the brew is weak. Too little, and it turns into something that could be weaponized. You and your apprentice squat beside the fermentation jar, stirring slowly while you eyeball the consistency. It should look like thin porridge, glug like lazy honey, and smell like a crossroads between bread dough and a wet animal pen. It does. Perfect. You reach for a carved gourd ladle to scoop a test sample. Your apprentice fumbles to light the inspection lamp, a shallow bowl of oil with a wick that's always too short. The light flickers over the murky surface of the brew, revealing faint swirls of barley fragments dancing like exhausted plankton. You dip a finger in. Taste. Smack your lips. Frown. Taste again. "Well," he asks. You tilt your head. "It has potential." Which is brewer speak for not terrible yet. You adjust the water slightly, adding a splash from the canal jug you filled earlier. Then stir again, this time in a spiral, starting from the edges inward. Old brewer superstition, one your grandmother swore by. You never asked why. You don't want to know. Some knowledge should ferment in mystery. Historians still argue whether these rituals were based on observed chemical reactions or just a way to keep apprentices from stirring in straight lines. Either way, it works often enough that you stick with it. The scent rising now is promising, grainy, deep, with that faint tang of something alive. You smile faintly. Not the kind of smile you show people, but the small one that only comes when the balance feels right. Your apprentice leans over the jar, sniffs too hard, and nearly falls in. You catch him by the belt and yank him back. "First rule of brewing," you mutter. "Don't become part of the product." He chuckles, rubbing his nose. Second rule? You consider. Always blame the yeast. From outside, you hear the tap-tap of a staff. A priest's assistant appears, robed in dusty linen, holding a wooden tally stick. He doesn't say hello, just squints at your jars, counts silently, and scrawls a mark with charcoal. The temple wants 3 jugs by dusk, he says. For the evening rite. You nod. Tell them it'll be fresh. Too fresh and the gods get upset, he warns. Not fresh enough, they get offended. You sigh. If the gods could just send a memo. He doesn't laugh. Priests rarely do. He turns and leaves, staff clacking on the stones like a judgmental metronome. You go back to work. Selecting the right jars is delicate business. You tap each one like a melon, listening for the right hollow thump. Then you uncork the 3 chosen vessels, strain them through a cloth made of twisted reeds, and pour the filtered beer into tall, slender clay containers marked with your personal brewer's stamp, 2 wavy lines and a barley stalk. Your apprentice wipes sweat from his brow, looking pleased. These are going to the gods, he says with pride. Or at least their representatives, you reply. Same thing, different appetites. The filled jars sit in a neat row, sweating slightly in the heat. You cover them with clay stoppers, wrap them in damp cloth, and prepare them for the delivery donkey. Yes, that donkey. The one with the attitude problem. It arrives with its usual snort of disdain, led by a boy who looks like he's about 12 and already tired of everything. He bows, loads the jars into the side baskets, and asks, anything fragile? It's beer, you say. Emotionally, yes. He blinks, nods, walks off. You watch them disappear into the city haze, a small caravan of barley dreams and hoofed contempt. Then you turn back to the fermenting vat. It's gurgling softly. You crouch again, dipping a finger in for a third taste. Better now, richer, rounder. You can already imagine how this batch will age overnight. Your apprentice peeks over your shoulder. You think the gods really drink it? You pause. I think the priests do. He laughs. Then, quieter, but maybe Ninkasi tastes it too. Just a drop. You nod. You don't say it aloud, but you hope she does. The sun has begun to dip. Shadows stretch like lazy cats across the walls. You wash your hands in a bowl of tepid water, scrubbing off the clingy residue of a day's labor. Your apprentice does the same, somehow managing to splash more water on himself than the bowl. Then, you both sit, side by side, backs to the kiln. The air is golden. The beer is breathing. The day isn't done, but it's slowing. And in that soft quiet, with barley on your hands and the scent of earth in your lungs, you let yourself believe that maybe, just maybe, this batch will be the one people remember. You're barely catching your breath when the priest's assistant returns, not alone this time, but with a new problem clinging to his heels like smoke to fire. A young scribe in tow, clay tablets in hand, eyes wild with panic. The festival numbers were wrong, the assistant snaps. You owe 2 more jugs. No. You blink. They just left with 3. The scribe nods nervously. Yes, but the high priest added a last-minute invocation. More beer is needed. Of course. The gods are thirsty tonight. You mutter something inaudible and rise. 2 more jugs means digging into tomorrow's stash, a risky move. Fermentation is barely underway. Rushing it could mean a batch too raw, too foamy, or worse, flat. You open the freshest vat, catching the aroma, tart, biting, slightly young. Still, it's usable in a pinch. You fill 1 jar carefully, straining the mash through reed cloth, catching stray husks before they clump. The second jar's trickier, less liquid, more sludge. You dilute, slightly, whispering apologies to Ninkasi as you stir. Your apprentice, sensing the urgency, works without question. He corks the jars, wipes the rims, and helps hoist them onto a fresh reed tray. They won't know, he says. They'll taste incense before they taste this. You smirk. Let's hope the prayers are long. The assistant and scribe take the delivery and vanish down the alley again, robes flapping like offended geese. You watch them go and exhale. A breeze slides through the courtyard, lifting your tunic slightly. You let it pass over you, cooling the sweat that clings like regret. The sun's low now, bathing the clay walls in amber. Your apprentice sits beside you, silent for once, staring at the sky. Do you think we'll ever run out of barley? He asks. No, you say. But we might run out of patience. He chuckles. You don't. Not this time. In the silence that follows, your ears pick up something strange. A bubbling that's uneven. You turn, frown, approach the main fermentation jar. The sound's off, too loud, too sharp. You lift the lid slowly. The mash has overfoamed, spilling slightly down the sides. Not catastrophic, but clear sign of imbalance. You curse under your breath. The fresh water. From earlier. The one that might have had something extra in it. Historians still argue whether canal runoff ever genuinely enhanced fermentation or just accelerated rot. You're starting to suspect the latter. You ladle out some froth, adjust the lid again, and fan the top gently to cool the surface. The bubbling steadies. A close call. Your apprentice approaches, eyes wide. Is it bad? It's correcting itself, you say, half lying. We'll monitor it overnight. You light a small oil lamp and place it beside the jar. Firelight flickers across the surface, casting dancing shadows on the bubbling mash. It feels alive, temperamental, hungry, unpredictable. Like every brew you've ever made. You sit again, your body groaning like old wood, and stare at the clay tablet on the wall. A scribble from your uncle. Beer doesn't forgive, but it forgets. You never asked what it meant. Maybe you understand now. Your apprentice breaks the silence again. One day I want my own seal. You nod. You'll need your own disasters too. He thinks this over. Maybe I'll just borrow yours. You shake your head. My disasters come with interest. The stars begin to show. A few at first. Then dozens. Then hundreds. They scatter across the sky like millets spilled by a careless god. The city of Ur softens, breathes, glows faintly under the weight of evening. Somewhere, a drumbeat begins. A soft rhythm in the distance, temple music. The rites have started. Your beer, questionable or not, is now divine offering. You hope it doesn't explode on the altar. Your apprentice has dozed off, curled near the kiln like a loyal dog. You resist the urge to throw a cloth over him. Instead, you lean back, gaze up, and whisper one last prayer. Not for success. Not for fame. Just for fermentation. Steady, strong, and sacred. You wake before the rooster does. Not by choice, but because something shifted. The air feels too still, like a breath held too long. You sit up slowly, bones complaining, and scan the courtyard. The fire pit's gone cold. The fermentation vat glows faintly in the lamplight, undisturbed. Then it hits you. The bubbling's stopped. You rush over, kneel beside the jar, and listen. Nothing. Not a gurgle, not a hiss. Just silence. No, 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 you mutter, pulling back the reed lid. The surface is flat. Too flat. Like the beer gave up halfway through. You stir cautiously, hoping for a burp, a fizz, something. The mash shifts like thick soup, but no signs of life. This batch was supposed to be tomorrow's rations. A temple order. A household supply. Your backup for the barley festival next week. All of it, sleeping. Your apprentice stirs awake at the edge of the courtyard. What's wrong? It's gone dormant. He blinks. What does that mean? You don't answer. Instead, you grab a torch, strike flint, and hold it low beside the jar. You're looking for movement, tiny bubbles, foam edges, yeast rings, but there's nothing. Not even a sour smell to prove something tried. Yeast's dead, you finally say. Or scared. Historians still argue whether fluctuations in night temperature could shut down a Sumerian ferment. You don't need their debates. You have your ruined batch right here. Your apprentice sits up straighter. Can we save it? You scratch your chin. Maybe. If we warm it. Feed it. With what? Sweet mash. He brightens. We have some left. No, you say. We have ingredients left. The distinction matters. You rise, dust yourself off, and start pulling jars from the back shelf. Dried dates, barley flour, old bread that never got baked. You crush it together into a sticky mass and heat it gently over the fire pit, which you've now reignited with a single matchstick's worth of ancient flint. The smell is incredible, like candied grain and roasted patience. You ladle the sweet mash into the dormant vat and stir slowly. It accepts the offering with a sluggish slosh. No reaction yet, but you didn't expect one immediately. You place a warm stone at the base of the jar, wrap the body with reed mats, and tuck the whole thing in like a sleepy child. Then you sit and wait. Your apprentice watches, arms wrapped around his knees. Do you Think it'll work? No, you reply. I think it might. He nods. For him, that's enough. The first rays of dawn slip over the wall, lighting the jar's rim like a halo. And just then, a bubble. Small. Quiet. But real. You exhale. Not victory, but not defeat either. She's waking up, you whisper. You spend the next hour in quiet motion. Scrubbing tools, checking lids, stretching your sore arms against the morning light. The world slowly comes alive around you, roosters crowing, distant shouting, the city shaking off its dreams. A neighbor passes by with a basket of figs and pauses to wave. You nod back. No words needed. She's tasted your beer. She understands the stakes. A boy races down the alley, nearly dropping a loaf of bread too big for his arms. He's grinning, though, yelling something about his father finally smiling. You hope it's because of the batch you delivered yesterday. Or maybe just the figs. Either way, you feel oddly proud. The fermentation continues. The bubbles return, irregular but determined. You'll need to watch them all day, feed them more if needed, coax them like shy animals. But for now, the brew is no longer dying. Your apprentice claps once, softly. You did it! We did it! You toss him the ladle. Now stir. For how long? Until I say stop. He grins and gets to work, stirring in slow figure eights, muttering under his breath like the mash might be listening. You hope it is. The day stretches ahead, hot, loud, chaotic, but in this moment, your workshop is calm. A heartbeat preserved in barley and breath. You lean back, sip the last of yesterday's brew, and smile. Disaster, dodged. For now. You don't even get through your first sip before a new shadow darkens the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, and dragging something that sloshes. It's Robbie, the temple's official brewmaster, a man who smells like incense, goat sweat, and ego. I heard your batch went flat, he says without preamble, setting down a massive clay jug that thuds with the weight of smugness. I brought you something that might help. Or remind you what real beer tastes like. You raise an eyebrow, not rising from your seat. Was that before or after you added half a jar of honey to hide the bitterness? He grins like a crocodile at a fish fair. Still better than whatever puddle you poured out last month. You don't argue. You just nod toward the jar by the fire pit, now bubbling faintly under its cozy reed wrap. She's coming back. Robbie snorts. Or she's saying goodbye. Your apprentice, bless his tiny rebellious soul, chirps in. Better to bring her back than oversweeten her corpse. You glance sideways. Careful, you murmur. He's got connections. And a very fragile sense of humor. Robbie glares, but lets it slide. Instead, he pulls out a dipstick, opens his own jug, and invites you to taste. You do, reluctantly. It's thick, golden, and yes, very sweet. Too sweet. Cloying, like a date that won't stop talking about their father's temple rank. It'll please the priests, he says. It'll drown their taste buds, you reply. He shrugs. They don't drink for taste. They drink for visions. You hand him back the stick. Then maybe you should sell this to a prophet. Historians still argue whether the sweetness of some Sumerian beers was deliberate ritual design or just overcompensation for poor fermentation. In Robbie's case, you'd bet on the latter. He leaves with a flourish, offering a mock bow. Good luck with your resurrection, he says, then stomps off, jug sloshing like a defeated thundercloud. Your apprentice mutters something unrepeatable. You pretend not to hear. Instead, you return your attention to the jar. The bubbles have steadied. The yeast is feeding again. You check the temperature with your palm, gently pressing against the clay. Warm. Consistent. Your shoulders ease. A bit. The rest of the morning passes in careful maintenance. You prepare new loaves for tomorrow's batch, kneading barley mash into rough cakes and baking them just enough to hold their shape. You scatter a few along the courtyard wall to dry, keeping an eye out for curious birds. A small crow watches from a roof beam. You throw a pebble. It caused an offense and flies away. Your apprentice begins cleaning tools, scraping the mixing vats, scrubbing ladles, rinsing reed strainers. He hums that same off-key temple melody, and this time, you don't stop him. The rhythm helps. And besides, the beer's too strong to curdle now. You carve updated notes into the clay tablet, batch revived, sweet mash added, Robbie jealous. A record for future you, and maybe future generations, if they ever care how you battled yeast and survived. Then you hear the clamor. Market bells ringing. Loud, urgent. You peek over the courtyard wall. A new caravan's arrived, merchants from the north, bringing figs, spices, and gossip. Always gossip. You grab 2 small jars and nod to your apprentice. Let's see what they're trading. The market is chaos wrapped in dust. You weave through hawkers shouting prices, women bartering over flax, a goat that appears to be holding a grudge. You find a merchant sampling date wine and offer your jar. He sniffs, sips, pauses. Strong, he says. Earthy. Like the god's breath, you add. He laughs and hands over a bundle of dried apricots. Fair trade. The second jar goes to a musician who's been singing since sunrise. You exchange it for a song about a brewer who saved a wedding by fermenting beer overnight. You suspect he's making it up, but the tune's catchy, so you let him keep the myth. On the way back, you bump into Robbie again. He's trying to convince a foreign trader to accept his overly sweet brew as highly prized temple stock. The trader makes a face like he just chewed a fermented sock. You wink at him and keep walking. Back in your courtyard, the beer is bubbling like a lullaby. You feed it a final touch, just a pinch of old dried mint, an experiment your grandmother once swore by. Keeps the brew polite, she used to say. You never knew what that meant, but it sounds wise. As the sun arcs high, and the stone floor turns too hot to sit on, you retreat to the shaded corner by the kiln. Your apprentice follows, arms full of fresh reed rope and wild questions. Do you think the beer dreams? He asks suddenly. You consider. I think we do. And the beer remembers it. You return from the market just in time to see your wife lifting the lid off one of the jars. She sniffs, tilts her head, and then looks at you with the sort of expression that's somewhere between impressed and concerned. It's awake, she says, then steps back and folds her arms. You peer into the jar, catch a whiff of warm yeast and barley, and nod slowly. She's humming again. Your apprentice beams. We brought it back. Your wife gestures toward the fermenting setup. And now what? You write it a song? Or maybe marry it? You smirk. If it stays this stable, I just might. You return to your workbench, checking the clay tablets you carved earlier. A delivery is scheduled for tomorrow morning, 2 temple priests, 1 merchant family, and a visiting noble who apparently insists on a specific kind of foam. Yes, foam. Not flavor, not clarity, foam. You make a mental note, deliver the fizziest jar and let him think it's a gift from Enlil himself. The apprentice reads the tablet over your shoulder. He's the one with the big hat, right? They all have hats, you mutter. But his is the tallest. Compensating? Obviously. You mark the noble's delivery with a triangle symbol and then move to the payment records. You've been paid in barley, fish, linen, and, most recently, what appeared to be a very anxious chicken. You still don't know what to do with it. It clucks in the background like a furry alarm. Historians still debate whether Sumerian brewers were officially paid in standard rations or a mixture of barter and goodwill. Based on your experience, it's mostly panic and poultry. Your apprentice walks over with a question. What happens if the foam doesn't hold? We lie, you say. Tell him it's sacred air. Will he believe that? He's already paying extra for bubbles. He'll believe anything. The day drifts on, and your courtyard becomes a rotating stage of activity. Neighbors drop by to ask for small jars, for my uncle's ceremony, for my sister's wedding, for my husband's birthday, which I forgot. You hand out samples, note the promises of payment, and wonder how many will remember to return with anything more than excuses. One neighbor does return, with a tiny clay figure carved to look like a brewer. For luck, she says. Or guilt, whichever works faster. You place it near your fermentation jar like a guardian idol. Your apprentice gives it a name. You immediately forget it. Mid-afternoon settles in like a sigh. You go back to straining one of the older batches, scooping mash into a reed sieve and letting the liquid drain slowly into cooling jars. Your apprentice keeps watch on the main vat, occasionally whispering to it like it's a sleepy animal. You don't stop him. Everyone has their method. You take a moment to clean your hands, then gather the fresh jars in a line. Each one sealed, marked, and wrapped in a damp cloth to maintain temperature. You feel proud. This batch, revived, fussed over, borderline miraculous, might be your best of the season. Then someone knocks. It's a temple courier, breathing heavily and holding a wax-stamped scroll. You break the seal. The message is short, tomorrow's delivery increased. 8 jars. By dawn, you do the math in your head. You have 6 ready. That means 2 more, tonight. Of course, you say aloud, mostly to the gods. Why wouldn't I spend the night with barley instead of sleep? Your apprentice leans in. Should I cancel my dreams? Tell him to come back next week. You set the scroll aside, roll your shoulders, and stare at your jars like a general planning for battle. You'll need to tap the backup fermentation. It's younger, sharper, and if you push it, dangerous. But it's all you've got. You prep quickly, setting out new reed filters, heating clean water, crushing another handful of mint for flavor. Your apprentice lights the kiln while you kneel beside the jar. The surface bubbles with enthusiasm. Almost too much. You scoop, filter, test. The flavor is aggressive, sour with a sharp, grassy kick, but drinkable. Barely. You pour carefully into 2 new jars, seal them, and whisper a very sincere apology to anyone who has to drink them. Your wife returns just in time to catch you labeling them. That noble better be grateful, she says. I hope he chokes on the foam. We all need goals, you reply. And then, without meaning to, you laugh. Because the absurdity of it all, beer as currency, beer as offering, beer as political tool, suddenly strikes you as hilarious. You laugh until your apprentice joins in, and even your wife lets out a reluctant snort. And there, amid the jars and the barley and the pressure, you remember, this is your life. Wild, bubbling, full of barley and bad decisions. And still, pretty good. You wake to torchlight. Not dawn. Not birdsong. Just the flickering glow of oil fire and your apprentice shaking your shoulder like he's unsure if you're dead or just deep in barley dreams. The courier's here early, he whispers. Like, too early. You sit up, spine cracking like dry pottery, and look toward the gate. Sure enough, there's a tall figure cloaked in dusty linen, holding a checklist and looking extremely unimpressed by the state of your tunic or your face. 8 jars, he says without greeting. All sealed. All cold. You want them to sing too? You mutter, rubbing your eyes. I want them on the cart before the priest notices I'm gone. You groan, swing your legs over, and begin the final loading ritual, double-checking lids, dampening the cloths, marking your seal with a sharp stylus. Your apprentice helps, slower than usual. He's barely awake, swaying slightly, a clay lid in one hand and a beetle crawling over the other. You slap the beetle away, pass him a jar, and grunt, focus. This is priest beer, not festival beer. No surprises. The jars are ready, 6 solid, 2 questionable, all lined up like soldiers reporting for duty. The courier inspects each one with the solemnity of a judge at a goat pageant. You can't tell if he's satisfied or just used to disappointment. These better not foam too early, he mutters. That noble's had indigestion since last solstice. He drinks with his nose, you reply. Tell him to use his mouth. The courier snorts. You like him a little more now. He hauls the jars onto the cart, an old thing with one wheel that squeaks in protest, and disappears into the still dark streets. You and your apprentice stand in silence, watching him go. The courtyard is quiet, cool, damp from the night air. You sit down on the stone bench and stretch your arms above your head. That's done, you say. Until next time. There's always a next time, he replies. And the next jar. You grin. Maybe you're rubbing off on him. The morning unfolds like warm cloth. You reheat yesterday's mash, feed the next starter vat, crumble more barley loaves into the basin. Your apprentice returns to cleaning, humming that same off-key chant. This time, you hum along. Mid-morning brings an unusual visitor, a woman draped in dyed linen, wearing more bronze than you'd see at a market. She introduces herself as the steward of a merchant house, New Inn. You are interested in trade. I've heard, she says, that your beer doesn't cause hallucinations. Only in small doses, you reply. And with proper ventilation. She smiles. We'd like to try a batch. You squint. For household use? For export, she says. North, toward Akkad. You nearly spit your barley cake. You want to travel with it? 2 weeks. On foot. Through marshland. You stare. That beer won't survive. It'll turn to vinegar. She shrugs. Vinegar has a market too. You don't say yes. But you don't say no. Instead, you offer her a seat, a cup, and a long conversation about temperatures, clay stability, and how to keep yeast angry but loyal. Historians still argue whether Sumerians understood shelf life or simply accepted the consequences of time. In your case, you're willing to test the theory. She leaves with a small jar and a promise to return. You sit back, chewing a fig pit, and wonder if your name will one day be carved into a tray tablet next to jars marked "You are, no visions, guaranteed." Your apprentice sidles up beside you. Are we expanding? We're experimenting. Same thing. Not when it leaks. You spend the rest of the day in a strange balance of hope and fatigue. You scrub old vats, rinse clay lids, rewrap the elder jars in fresh cloth. One of them hums when you lift it, just a slight hiss of pressure escaping. You smile. Still alive. Still fermenting. The city pulses around you, chants from the ziggurat, laughter from the market, a child shouting about a stolen melon. All the while, your jars breathe softly in the shade. Living, shifting, becoming. You sit again by the kiln, where warmth wraps you like a woolen cloak, and you stare at your fingers, scarred, stained, steady. Beer is hard. Brewing is harder. But this is yours. And it's enough. Afternoon slinks into your courtyard like a lazy cat, curling around the edges of your vats and making everything feel just a little heavier. Even the air seems thicker, scented with sun-baked clay and the ever-present tang of fermenting barley. You're elbow deep in your starter vat when a sharp voice slices through the haze. You! It's Misha, your neighbor, part-time moneylender, full-time expert in things he doesn't actually do. He's holding a clay jar like it owes him silver. What did you put in this? You straighten up slowly, wiping your hands on your tunic. Which batch? The one you gave my cousin. He claims it made his dreams louder. You blink. Louder? He said the goats were talking. With accents. You tilt your head. Did he eat anything else? Misha narrows his eyes. That's not the point. I need 6 jars. By the end of the week. Same recipe. You stare at him. You just complained. I know. But now he won't drink anything else. Historians still argue whether Sumerians experienced mild hallucinogenic effects from wild fermentation, contaminated ingredients, or just really enthusiastic storytelling. You suspect it's mostly the latter. Still, you nod. Business is business. You mark it down, 6 jars, cousin's dream juice, and sigh. That means another batch tonight. No rest. Again. Your apprentice peeks over your shoulder as you scratch the order into a clay tablet. That's a lot. It's always a lot. Can we make it without visions? If we try. Should we try? You glance at him. Now that's a brewer's question. You prep the ingredients, soaked bread, roasted barley, a pinch of mint, a handful of dried figs because why not lean into the cousin's fantasy? The mixture goes into the fresh vat, hot water poured over slowly, stirred in patient spirals. Your apprentice handles the heat while you measure the timing. Everything matters now. How fast it cools, how much it foams, how it smells when the steam lifts. The scent rises, thick and sweet and oddly inviting. You lean in. Still no accents. Promising. You seal the jar with a reed mat and whisper a small joke to it, just in case. Some brewers chant, others pray. You offer sarcasm. Seems to work just as well. Later, as the mixture cools, you sit on the ground with a cooling jar between your feet and carve small lines into another tablet. Inventory, delivery records, temple dues, owed favors. The list grows longer than you like. You consider ignoring it. Then remember the priest who once showed up with a stick and a very literal interpretation of the word overdue. You keep carving. Your apprentice leans against the wall, eyes half closed. We ever get a day off? When the gods stop drinking? So, never? Correct. You toss him a half-dried figure. He misses it completely. You finish the tablet, set it to dry, and begin cleaning again. Every tool has to be scrubbed, every reed mat checked for mold. A single lazy mistake and the whole batch turns sour, bitter, or worse, explosive. Yes, that's happened. Twice. Your apprentice asks if he can sing. You consider. Only if the mash bubbles in time. He listens, waits. Then hums carefully, matching the gurgle like a nervous duet partner. It's absurd. It's perfect. The sun dips lower, shadows stretching across the courtyard like sleepy limbs. You check the newest vat, warm, pulsing slightly, foam forming in neat little rings. Good signs. You ladle a small taste, swish it in your mouth, and nod. Not goat accent strong, but definitely memorable. You think the cousin will be pleased. You begin prepping the clay jars for storage, wiping each one, checking for cracks, marking them with your stamp. Your apprentice carries them one by one, careful now, steady in his steps. You watch him work. He's improving. Less stumbling. More instinct. Maybe one day he'll take over this place, though you'd never say it aloud. Not yet. Instead, you grunt and say, "Don't drop it." He grins. "Haven't yet today." "That's the spirit," you reply. "And if you do, make sure it's empty." The city murmurs around you. Somewhere, someone sings off-key. Somewhere else, a pot crashes. Life goes on. You cap the final jar, lean back, and breathe. Another batch, another day, another ridiculous order fulfilled. And still, you wouldn't trade it for anything. Except maybe sleep. You finally get a moment alone, just you and the last jar, sealed tight, sitting in the cooling shade like a content old man who's seen too much and survived anyway. The courtyard is quiet now. Your apprentice has passed up beside the empty reed basket, one sandal off, one hand still clutching a fig pit. You let him sleep. He's earned it. So have you. You sit down beside the final batch, hand resting on the clay. It's warm, firm, vibrating faintly with the inner life of active yeast. You give it a gentle knock, just once, like tapping an old friend on the shoulder. The sound is good, deep, confident. You close your eyes and allow your thoughts to drift. This whole life, barley, vats, cracked tablets, shouting priests, drunk nobles, it wasn't what you imagined as a child. You wanted to be a scribe once, back when you still thought words had more power than ferment. But here you are. And strangely enough, it feels like a kind of magic. Not the kind sung in temple hymns, but the kind made by fire, water, and waiting. Your wife returns, barefoot and smirking. She eyes the jars. Did the cousin's dream beer survive? Just barely. Good. He owes me figs. She crouches beside you, picking up a drying cloth and absently wiping a jar you already cleaned. You ever think about stopping? Every day. And? Every day I don't. She nods. That's all. You both sit in silence for a while, shoulders barely touching, the smell of roasted grain and hot clay in the air. Eventually, your apprentice stirs. What time is it? Late, you say. Or early. Depends on the jar. He groans and stretches, bones cracking like sun-baked wood. We have any left to drink? You nod toward a small vessel in the corner, one saved from a previous batch. He stumbles over, pours into 3 uneven cups, and hands them out with the ceremony of a high priest. To barley, he says. To stubbornness, you add. Your wife smirks. To never running out jars. You clink, sip, and for a moment, time slows. The beer is smooth, cool enough to fool the tongue, slightly sweet at the edge, with a soft bite that makes the chest hum. It's good. Not perfect. But that's the point. Historians still argue whether perfection was ever the goal of Sumerian brewing, or if it was simply about offering something alive, something honest, to gods and neighbors alike. You drink to that. Later, with the jars stacked and covered, the fire reduced to embers, and your apprentice already snoring on his mat, you make one last walk across the courtyard. The moon is high, fat with light, casting everything in shades of blue and silver. You check the main fermentation vat again. Still breathing. Still growing. You whisper a short thanks to Ninkasi. Not just for the beer, but for the rhythm of it. The way it forces you to stay present. To observe. To wait. You know tomorrow will bring more orders. More chaos. More questions from neighbors about whether dreams of floating cows are a side effect. But for now, just for now, you rest your hand on the clay and let your thoughts settle. Not every day is successful. Not every jar makes it. But this one did. And so did you. You head back to your mat, careful not to wake the boy. The city sleeps around you. The beer sleeps beside you. And for a moment, everything is exactly as it should be. Morning comes like a whispered apology, soft light spilling over your reed roof, the chirp of birds that somehow always sound too cheerful for people who don't have to brew anything. You rise slowly, rolling each joint like it needs negotiation. The courtyard is already warming, the jars still tucked in their shady corners like content animals that survived the night. Your apprentice is still asleep, one hand over his face, the other gripping an empty cup like it might refill itself by magic. You let him be. First task today, inspecting the backup fermentation. The one from 3 days ago, thicker, deeper, riskier. You remove the seal and sniff. Oh, it's powerful. Bold, sour, with a sweetness beneath it that catches you by surprise. You stir gently, watching the foam rise. Still alive. Still useful. This might be the one you use for that strange export order, if it doesn't eat through the jar first. You dip a ladle, take a sip. It bites your tongue, sharp and bright, then fades into something earthy and oddly nostalgic, like chewing on roasted memory. You nod slowly. That'll wake the Acadians. You spend the next hour checking each sealed jar from the cousin's dream batch. They're holding strong. Foam is tight. Bubbles are lazy, not frantic, a good sign. You mark each one with your barley seal and a small star. You're proud of these. Then come the visitors. First, the steward from the merchant house again, this time with a clay tablet bearing trade offers. They want regular shipments. Small ones. Just enough to test markets. You accept, on one condition, they provide their own carriers. You've had enough of watching your beer bounce along donkey carts like forgotten temple drums. She agrees. Leaves 2 silver rings behind as a show of faith. Next, Misha. Again. With his cousin. The cousin looks dazed, mildly terrified, and extremely hydrated. He said I could have another jar, the cousin whispers. Misha shrugs. It's his birthday. Technically. You hand him a jar, half strength. No figs this time. You don't want to be blamed for flying goats again. Your apprentice finally appears, hair askew, face puffy with sleep. Did we miss dawn? You glance at the sun. Only by 2 prayers and a goat sacrifice. He groans and stumbles to the wash basin. You get back to work. There are new loaves to bake, more barley to soak, and 1 cracked vat to patch with clay paste. As you smear the paste into the fissure, you hum a song your mother used to sing, not a brewer's tune, just something about rain and millet fields. Your hands remember it better than your mouth. Your apprentice tries to mimic the tune. Fails. Turns it into a rhythm with his stirring stick. You let him. By midday, you started another batch. This one will be lighter, meant for the workers rebuilding the temple steps. They asked for something refreshing. You laughed for a full minute, then promised to try. You use more mint, less mash, and a dash of leftover day pulp. The scent is sweet, like summer and mistakes. As it simmers, a neighbor leans over the wall. You making that soft stuff? You nod. For the ones who sweat for the gods. He grins. Then make it strong enough to forget the gods, just for a minute. You laugh. That's extra. He throws you a dried pomegranate. So charge me later. The city hums with the rhythm of work and gossip. A child runs past shouting about fish rain. A scribe argues with a pot seller over the price of ink. Somewhere, a flute plays 2 notes over and over like its loss. And through it all, you stir. The mash thickens, bubbles, breathes. You check the temperature with your hand, cool it with wet cloths, hum to it softly like a lullaby no one taught you. Historians still argue whether brewers sang to their jars or simply talked to themselves. You know better. You weren't talking to the jar. You were listening. And it whispered back. The heat creeps in slowly, the kind that makes clay walls sweat and tempers short. You're halfway through kneading barley loaves when a thick knock echoes at the gate. You glance up, dusted in flour, and groan quietly. That's not a neighbor asking for a cup knock. That's a someone from the temple who thinks your time is free knock. You wipe your hands on your tunic, nod to your apprentice, who's already pretending to look busy, and open the gate. 2 men stand there. Both in temple linen, both wearing expressions like they've just smelled something they can't identify and assume is your fault. One speaks. High Priest Den Callum would like to sample your morning batch. Now, you say. Before it's a batch? He blinks, either unamused or unaware of what you mean. It must be presented in the next ritual cycle. Of course. The sacred last-minute requirement. You sigh and gesture them in. The foam's still sleeping. You'll get what she gives. They follow you in like they've never seen clay before. One points at a fermenting jar and asks, "Is that safe?" "No," you say. "It's also delicious." You draw a sample from the morning brew, light, herbal, slightly sweet. It's not temple strong, but it's honest. You hand the ladle over. The man tastes. His mouth twitches. It's gentle. You nod. You asked for morning beer. She wakes up slow. He turns to his companion. This will suffice. You dip a jar full and seal it. You want visions? Drink it under the moon. You want balance? Drink it with bread. They take it and go, silent as they came. You wait until the gate shuts before muttering, "Mani and Kasi confuse your vowels." Your apprentice appears behind you with a fresh reed mat. They liked it? They didn't spit it out. High praise, he says, and you both laugh. You spend the afternoon preparing rations for tomorrow's deliveries, smaller jars, sealed tight, marked with the spiral 4 mid-strength. These go to households, small ceremonies, maybe even weddings if they don't run out of figs first. A woman arrives carrying 2 empty jars and an apology. Last batch was so good my husband drank both before guests arrived. You give her a stern look. Tell him I want the jars back in one piece next time. She nods solemnly. He only broke one. You squint. She smiles sweetly. You hand her replacements. As you work, a boy from the grain fields wanders in. Mud on his tunic, hair full of straw. He carries a sack slung over his shoulder. They say you can smell bad barley before it lies to you. You sigh. They also say donkeys can sing. He opens the sack. It's borderline. Pale, gritty, smells slightly off. Not spoiled, but definitely lazy grain. You pinch a few kernels, roll them between your fingers, and nod. You'll get beer from this, you say, but it won't respect you in the morning. He laughs. Good. Neither will my cousins. You trade him a small jar for the grain. You'll blend it into a mix, soften the edge with better stock. Waste not. By late day, you're soaked in sweat and barley dust, hands raw from rope, mind buzzing with measurements. Your apprentice drags himself across the courtyard like a dramatic ghost. If I smell mash again, I might cry. You hand him a cool cup. Then cry into this. It's good for the foam. He drinks. Sighs. That's the best one yet. You believe him. Today's batch has depth. The kind that comes from struggle and small adjustments. From forgetting one step and fixing it with intuition. From experience. Historians still argue whether beer was ever considered a true art form in Sumer. You think that's the wrong question. You don't make it to impress. You make it because you don't know how not to. Evening approaches. The shadows grow longer, the air cooler, the city quieter. You store the sealed jars in the back room, away from the wind. You clean the ladles one last time. Feed the dog that's wandered in. Then, at last, you sit on your familiar stone seat, beside the familiar wall. A jar cooling beside your leg and a sky overhead full of ancient stories no one remembers how to tell. The apprentice curls up again, murmuring barley numbers in his sleep. You shake your head and lean back, feeling the soreness settle deep into your shoulders. Tomorrow, the jars will go out. The orders will change. Someone will complain, someone will praise you, and someone, probably the noble, will say your foam felt too spiritual. And you'll stir. You'll brew. You'll write it all down. Because this is what you do. And the beer, like you, keeps going. You awaken to a sound no brewer wants to hear, the soft crack of clay under strain. You bolt upright, heart lurching, and sprint barefoot across the courtyard, half expecting to find a flood of barley soup oozing across the floor. But no! It's worse. One of your oldest fermentation jars has split at the base, a thin fracture snaking outward like lightning frozen in clay. The mash inside has begun to seep, slow, viscous, deliberate, like it knows exactly how hard you worked for it. Your apprentice appears, hair sideways, eyes wide. Earthquake? No, you mutter. Old age. You kneel beside the wounded jar, pressing your palm against its side. Warm. Alive. And bleeding. You've patched cracks before. Reed bands, clay paste, prayer, all in heavy rotation. But this one's not coming back. You sigh. Dip a ladle. Begin transferring what you can into another jar, newer, smaller, untested. It won't hold the full batch, so you prioritize the clearest liquid at the top, leaving the sludge and the foam to settle on the floor like abandoned children. Your apprentice helps in silence. No jokes this time. He knows when something sacred is breaking. By the time the transfer's done, you've saved 3/4. Not bad. Could have been worse. Still feels like a funeral. You pat the cracked jar gently. She served well. Your apprentice tilts his head. We bury it? You shake yours. We turn it upside down and let it dry. Then store tools in it. Every jar gets a second life. Historians still argue whether brewers developed emotional attachments to their tools or were simply too practical to waste materials. You know the answer, both. You patch the floor, mop the mess, and throw the leftover mash to the neighbor's pigs, who act like you've delivered royal cuisine. At least someone's having a good morning. Later, after the mess has dried and your pride has somewhat reassembled itself, a messenger arrives. He's grinning. That's suspicious. The noble says your phone was unexpectedly introspective. You blink. That's not a real phrase. Apparently it reminded him of his grandmother. Your apprentice leans over. Did she taste like beer? You wave the messenger off with a jar of your most neutral batch and collapse onto the bench, forehead slick with clay and exasperation. Unexpectedly introspective, you mutter. That's going on the wall. You spend the next hour repainting symbols on your storage lids. The marks have faded, sun, steam, time, and need refreshing. Your apprentice helps, mostly keeping the ink from spilling. You mark each type, strong, mild, ceremonial, breakfast, don't ask. You draw tiny faces on a few, just for your own amusement. One looks suspiciously like Robbie. At midday, your wife returns with a basket of herbs. From the trader's wife, said they're coming. You sniff. Basil and something else. Sharp, clean, slightly bitter. Could work. You toss a pinch into a simmering batch. Your apprentice stares. Is that allowed? It is now. You finish the afternoon prepping 2 new fermentation vats, rotating older jars to the cooler wall, checking reed mats for wear. The rhythm of the work steadies your breath. You're tired, sure, but it's the kind of tired that feels earned. Then you hear a commotion outside. A group of temple singers is rehearsing in the street, testing a new hymn. It's awful. Flat, droning, vaguely threatening. Your apprentice winces. That's not going to help fermentation. You toss him a rag. Stuff it in your ears. By evening, you finish more than you expected. The courtyard's clean, the batches are stable, and the cracked jar has been turned upside down and repurposed as a surprisingly elegant bench. You sit beside it with a cooling drink, watching the sky fade from gold to gray to soft navy. Stars peek out, cautious but curious. Your apprentice stretches beside you, limbs too long for his age. You think we'll still be doing this next year? You sip. You will. I'll be yelling at you from this jar. He snorts. Your ghost better be quiet. I plan on making better beer. You glance at him. Smile. Then make sure you make worse mistakes. The stars listen. The beer breathes. And for now, nothing else matters. It's deep night again, the kind where even the dogs stop barking and the wind tiptoes through the alleys like it's afraid to wake the walls. You're up, not by accident this time, but by habit. Fermentation doesn't sleep, and neither do you, not fully. Not when a batch is this young. You move through the courtyard barefoot, guided only by the flicker of your oil lamp and the memory of where everything usually is. You stop by the new vat, the one with the basil experiment. The surface is still, which is both good and suspicious. You listen closely. One bubble. Then another. Good. Not dead. Just dreaming slow. Your apprentice's soft snore echoes from the corner, woven in with the distant sound of a reed flute somewhere down the street. Someone's still awake, probably drunk, probably thankful. You hope it was your batch that got them there. You light a second lamp and set it near the cracked jar turnbench. It casts shadows that make the clay surface look almost alive. You sit beside it, stretching your back, and allow your mind to drift the way only quiet and darkness allow. You think of your first batch, the real first. You were 16, terrified, and certain you'd poisoned everyone. But no one died. One man even danced. He claimed it was divine. You knew it was undercooked barley and hope, but still, he believed. Historians still argue whether belief or barley did more for Sumer's civilization. You've seen how fragile both are. But together? Stronger than any temple. You get up, make another round of the jars. Tap lids gently. Sniff at the air. One jar is running hot. You add a wet cloth over its shoulders, like a fevered child. Another smells faintly sharp. You whisper to it like an apology. And then, as you're crouched beside your smallest batch, you hear it. A rustle. Behind the storage shelf. You freeze. Not a spirit, probably. More likely a rat. You slowly edge toward it, holding your stirring rod like a weapon. Then the culprit steps out. Not a rat. Not a ghost. A cat. Thin, scrappy, with eyes too big for its face and fur the color of old ash. It stares at you like it owns the place. You exhale. You're lucky I'm too tired to scream. It walks past you and sits by the warmest jar. Then, to your surprise, it curls up beside it and begins to purr. Fine, you mutter. You watch that one. But if it overfoams, it's your fault. The cat doesn't answer. Cats rarely do. You return to the bench. Sit. Rest your eyes for what feels like seconds. When they open again, the sky is lavender. Morning. Somehow, the cat is gone. The jars are breathing gently. The city stirs and whispers. Your apprentice wakes with a yawn loud enough to wake the ziggurat gods. Did we miss anything? You shrug. Only a ghost cat and a basil revelation. He groans. Not again. You begin the day's work slowly, no rush, no panic, just quiet rituals. Bread crusts crumbled. Ash swept. Tablets updated. You scratch a note onto the one tracking ingredient experiments. Basil equals promising. Unclear if it was the herb or the cat. As the sun rises, a neighbor walks by, waves, and calls out, "Smells like you're winning today." You wave back. We'll know by noon. By midday, you're bottling a new batch. It pours smooth. No foam riots. No sour bite. Your apprentice tastes it first. He closes his eyes, thinks hard, then opens them. It tastes like someone finally shut up the gods. You blink. I think that's a compliment. It is. You carve your stamp onto each new jar, barley stalk, wavy lines, one tiny that you always add for luck. Or for superstition. You're not sure anymore. The courtyard feels calm today. The fire burns low. The jars are still. And for once, so are you. The midday sun paints your courtyard in gold and grit. You're leaned over the table carving delivery updates into a fresh clay tablet, your stylus dragging slowly across its soft surface like a thought half-finished. Beside you, a jug rests under a damp cloth, cooling like a sleeping child. Your apprentice fans it with a palm frond, half-heartedly, but enough to keep the flies wondering. You know, he says between swipes, we could sell to the singers. You don't look up. We do. No, I mean the good ones. The ones from the East Quarter. With the drums. You pause. The ones who sing off-key while drunk? Exactly. Imagine how good they'd sound if the beer matched their optimism. You grunt. You just want to see if you can make someone hit notes high enough to crack a jar. He grins. We could call it High Priestess Blend. You shake your head. Focus. One miracle at a time. The day ticks forward. Slowly, but with purpose. You prepared 2 small jars for the temple guard's weekly visit. They don't drink much, but they drink fast, and you've learned that a mildly sweet brew with a crisp bite keeps them from bickering too long. You add a sprig of fenugreek to each, purely for effect. As you cork the second jar, a small girl arrives at the gate. She's holding a clay cup, barely the size of your palm. My mother says she left something behind, she says. You raise an eyebrow. What kind of something? She said it tasted like forgiveness. You blink, then nod. You know the batch. You pour her a half ladle's worth and press the cup back into her small hands. Tell her it was a limited edition, you say. The girl nods gravely and scurries away. Your apprentice exhales. Forgiveness, huh? You smile. Sometimes the East just understands better than we do. Historians still debate how much of Sumerian life was shaped by beer, whether it greased the wheels of diplomacy or simply kept the complaints quieter. Either way, you've seen more peace offerings come in jars than in prayers. Later, you do a final check on the basil experiment. The foams developed a pleasant, even texture, and the scent, sharp, green, earthy, is unlike anything you've brewed before. You ladle a taste. It lands smooth on the tongue, then lingers with a brightness you didn't expect. Not powerful. Not overpowering. Just different. Your apprentice tastes it and tilts his head. Tastes like something trying to be a garden. You nod. And almost succeeding. You bottle it. Just 3 jars. No label, no destination. You set them aside, like secrets waiting for the right ears. As the sun leans toward its descent, the courtyard grows quiet again. The city beyond your walls hums with other people's tasks, chisel strikes, rope creaks, faint chanting that never quite matches rhythm. Your apprentice begins collecting the spent reed mats, folding them carefully like they matter. You approve. They do. You take a moment. One rare, still moment. Sit beneath the corner awning. Drink a cup of the old batch. Not the best you've made, not the worst. It reminds you of long afternoons and almost rain. You sip slowly. Let the taste carry. From the shadows, the stray cat returns. It doesn't ask for anything. Just lies down beside your bare foot and sighs, tail flicking gently. You look over. Don't get too comfortable, you whisper. We're not done. But it doesn't listen. Of course it doesn't. Cats and beer, they both ignore instructions, but show up when it matters. The sky begins to dim. You lean back. Stretch. Watch as the stars blink into view like shy stories. There are still jars to stir. Orders to fill. Ideas to test. But not now. Now, you sit. With your apprentice sleeping nearby, your tools lined up like old friends, and a jar at your side that tastes almost like a garden that learned how to sing. Night wraps around you like well-worn cloth, soft, breathable, familiar. The courtyard glows faintly with the last orange flickers of your oil lamp, and the jars rest in silence, as if even fermentation has decided it's time to sleep. You sit back on your makeshift bench, the upturned, cracked jar, and stretch your legs slowly, toes brushing the edge of the cool clay floor. Your apprentice is curled in the corner again, half covered in a burlap cloth, mouth slightly open, snoring gently. He talks in his sleep sometimes. Tonight it sounds like he's reciting grain measurements to a dream that doesn't care. You let him be. The last jar of the day sits beside you, unsealed. You tilt it, sip slowly, and savor the flavor. This one's rich, mellow, deeper than you expected. The barley aged longer. The yeast had more time to think. You can taste the patience in it. Maybe even the doubt. You smile faintly. Around you, the city of Uar sleeps. In the distance, you can just barely hear the call of a night guard, his voice rising and falling like a wave rolling through clay alleys and reed rooftops. Somewhere closer, a baby cries and then quiets again. You look up. The stars are clear tonight, scattered across the sky like the first grains poured onto a clean mat. You count them, knowing you'll lose track, and not minding when you do. You sip again. The jar's still warm at the base. Still alive. Like everything else in this tiny, dusty, echoing world you've built. And for the first time in many nights, you don't feel tired. Just full, in the way only a long day of honest labor and small victories can fill a person. You think about tomorrow. There will be more barley to soak. More batches to save. More customers who want beer strong enough to forget, or light enough to remember. You'll make it. You always do. Maybe you'll try another herb. Maybe you'll finally test that sour fig paste you've been hiding under the grain sacks. Or maybe you'll just make what you know. And let it be enough. The cat returns one last time, silent as shadow. It curls near your feet, stretches once, then goes still. You don't move. You just sip, breathe, and wait. For nothing. For everything. For the next bubble. So now, the courtyard grows quiet. The stars overhead have multiplied, their soft shimmer cascading across the ancient walls like a blanket of quiet promises. The night doesn't rush you. It never does. It understands the rhythm of things fermented in the silence earned after a day well stirred. You stretch again, more slowly this time. Muscles loosened by warmth and repetition. There's no urgency anymore, only the steady exhale of the world around you, and the familiar feeling of having done enough. The jars beside you breathe softly in the dark. They don't demand anything. They're content to sit, to become, to wait. And so are you. In the distance, a breeze begins to move through the reeds, brushing past sleeping doorways and empty courtyards, carrying with it the scent of roasted grain, damp clay, and a hint of whatever herb you added earlier. Basil, maybe. Or just memory. You don't need to get up yet. Let the lamp burn down. Let the night keep you company. Let the stars tell their stories, even if you don't remember how to listen. You've brewed more than beer today. You've made something living. Something worthy. Something that might survive you, if only for a day. So rest now. Close your eyes. Let the heat leave your shoulders, the thoughts leave your brow, the world soften around the edges. Because the jars are full. The floor is dry. The apprentice is safe. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow will wait. Sleep now. You've earned it. Sweet dreams.